Good morning. Have you ever heard somebody say, get a grip? What happens when you lose your grip and you see your life unraveling before you? How do you fix something that is broken? Well, welcome to Timeout this morning. My name is Windt, and I'd like to say something about that in a moment. But before I do, I want to speak about Bill Gates because he's been in the news. And I want to use him as an example about what I'm trying to say this morning. So I'm in no way trying to belittle him or demean him. But he seems to be the second super billionaire after Jeff Bezos. I think in 2019 also got divorced. Bill Gates has been in the news lately. And it seems like Bill Gates is having a bad hair week, so to speak. In recent times, he's been accused of, having patents on vaccines and, making money out of people, unrighteously so by some people, and even being accused of making statements about population that is, the population needs to be reduced. And now it seems that Bill Gates, according to his wife, Melinda, their marriage is irretrievably broken, according to her. What a strong statement. Something that is irretrievably broken, there's no repairing, it seems. Now, I say this because many people have said to me, and maybe you've heard them said, I wish I was Bill Gates. And when people say that, and maybe they won't be saying it now, but when people say that, every time you say you want to be somebody else, you are devaluing your own life. And if you continue, and I continue devaluing my life, eventually I'll be worth nothing in my own eyes. As a matter of fact, I won't just be worth nothing in my own eyes, I may just be worth nothing in other people's eyes too. And to me, that is the beginning of unraveling of your life and eventually finding yourself at rock bottom and broken. And so I thought this morning, just a great example of how does that happen? How do we find our lives unraveling? And what are the causes and how do we fix that is found in a story, strangely, in the Bible. In Luke, Jesus speaks about a parable of the prodigal son. Now, if you know the way that Jesus taught, parables were real life stories in a way that he told to illustrate a truth in people's lives. And this story, might as well have been written for today because after so many years, hundreds of years, it's still relevant today because it's about a rich man, a wealthy man who had two sons. Obviously a younger one and an older one, because if you read the story, and he possessed a lot of wealth. And so one day his younger son came to him and he said to him, I want my share of the inheritance. I want my slice of the pie. I want what is rightfully mine. And the first step to seeing your life unravel before you is what I call the scourge of entitlement. It's in our country, it's in our politics, it's in our culture, but it's not just in our country. It seems to be all over the world. People feel entitled about certain things. It's their right. They have a right to things. And you know what happens, and I'm not saying that people don't have a right. It's just when we speak about entitlement, it's like we remove that one quality in our lives that's so valuable called appreciation. I call it, the attitude of gratitude. When I take out the attitude of gratitude in my life, I start appreciating nothing anymore. Even the small things or the big things are no longer appreciated. And this boy, he came and he practiced entitlement. But we can see his father was always going to give him all half of the inheritance anyway, because he didn't resist it. It's just that this boy came and he demanded it. And that was his first step to unraveling his life in the story of the prodigal son. The second thing that this son did is, after he was given half of what he thought he owned and was his right. And after practicing entitlement, he decided to pack up and leave home. Now, I want to say it's not wrong to pack up and leave home, but in the story, what this son forgot to remember is that what had made him in the first place was the fact that he belonged to a family. He had a father, he had a brother, he had a platform in his life. He didn't just fall from Mars and land somebody. Somebody paved a way for him to actually get to where he was. And when he left his family, when he stopped appreciating his family and where he came from, that was the second thing he did wrong, to unravel his life. You see, there's nothing wrong in he said to himself, I'm going to make my own way. I'm not going to wait. I'm going to make my own way. I'm going to make my own waves. Nothing wrong with that, except he didn't realize that actually he could do that, but he forgot that it was his family that had paved, his father that had paved that way for him to be able to walk down that road. And that's what entitlement robs us of. And when we leave our family and our platform, we are exposed. And that's exactly what happened. The third thing that happened to this son, this young son of this father, in the prodigal son story, is he went and he squandered all his wealth on wild living, one of the translations says. Now, that was his right, but you see, it's often the case. I mean, you can go look back when we don't appreciate things, when we forget to have an attitude of gratitude, when we forget where we come from, when we forget that there's people that have gone to pave the way before us, we easily lose what we have. We easily squander it. And as a matter of fact, it wasn't long. It was in a distant country, the story says. He wanted to get far away that nobody knew where he came from and how he made his money, because he didn't really make it. He was given it. And so he blew all of it. Now, after the third mistake that the son made, which he squandered his wealth, he hit rock bottom. And so I want to say, what happens, Jack? You say, what happens when I hit rock bottom? Well, that's not always a bad thing, because sometimes we have to go down to go up. Sometimes we have to go back to go forward in life, I have found. And so this son decided to get a job, something he'd never had before, because he never had to. And there were no jobs, because the story says there was a famine, there was a pandemic like today, and there were no jobs. And so somebody offered him a job to look after the pigs. Now, if you can understand, this was a story that Jesus was telling as a Jewish man to a Jewish audience. The pigs were the most unclean animals to the Jew. They didn't want to touch them. And this guy sent this son to go look after the pigs. And while he was looking after the pigs, he was hungry, and he thought, that stuff they're eating, those pigs, the husks, I wish I could eat those husks. That's how hungry I am. And something amazing happened to turn this son around. He had what I call an epiphany. Now, I know it sounds worse than it is, but an epiphany, he had a wow moment where he said, I have a divine revelation. I have a great idea. Good for you. He said, the Bible calls that epiphany, that good idea, that wow moment in this son's life when he hit rock bottom, when he realized his life was broken. It called it, he came to his senses. The first thing which helped him to put his life back together again is he came to his senses. And I really believe that sometimes that's what it takes to get us back, is to come to your senses. Realize where you've come from and where you have ended up with the pigs. And this man said, he had a second great idea. When he came to his senses, he said, I'm thinking about my father's servants where I came from. They have more food than they need. And here I am, I've got nothing to eat. I'm going to apply for a job as a servant in my father's house. Wow, what a turnaround from having it as an attitude of entitlement to saying, I am now feeling grateful again that I can go back to my father. And sometimes, as I said, he had this idea. He needed to go back to his father's house. But this time, not with entitlement, with a gratitude, with humility, saying, I'll be a servant in my father's house because it's better than where I am right now. And the second point was that I'm saying to his comeback of this young man, the son, was he said, I'll go back and I'll go and apply to be a servant in my father's house. The third one was, if you read the story, he came and he asked his father to forgive him. You know, forgiveness is an amazing quality to help us to heal and to restore us back to value our lives again. Because you see, when you don't value your own life, when you want to have somebody else's life, when somebody else's life looks greater than yours, we sometimes miss the value that we have in our own lives. And when he repented, when he asked forgiveness of his father, he completed his comeback. He fixed what was broken. He put his life back together. And the amazing story is, if you read it, his father was always waiting every day for his son to come back. He was believing there was going to be a comeback. He was standing at the door. And when the son came, he didn't negotiate the terms. He just said to the servants, listen, bring this boy some sandals. And sandals, I've always said, is like God putting sandals on us is to give us another opportunity to walk into our purpose. It's like a pathway, another pathway of that God has provided for us as a father. And then the father in the story, he said, just bring a nice cloak for this boy, because you see, he's probably naked and stinking and smelling, and his skin was probably sunburnt because he was looking after the pigs. And now he said it's probably a silk cloak he put over him to make him feel cozy. And because a cloak always speaks about a covering. You see, this boy had stepped out of his covering. He had stepped out of his father's house, and he was exposed to the pigs, and he was exposed to poverty because he squandered all that he had, his inheritance. And God said, I want to put it back. I want to cover you. I want to give you a new mantle, a new anointing. You know what anointing in the natural is? I want to give you momentum, because you see, when he hit rock bottom, he had no more momentum. And when he came back to his father's house, his father put a cloak on him to say, I want to give you a momentum in your life again. And then lastly, this father, he took one of these rings, probably one of his own rings. He said, bring it. And he put it on this boy's finger because he wanted to say, you belong in this house. He gave him that authority back again that he had lost because his life had unraveled and it had hit rock bottom and it was broken. You know, this story so reminds me of the lives of many people I know. And I just think of this father in the story is the story that reminds me of God, what God has done for us, and how even although we sometimes reject him and we want to do it on our own and we go and squander our inheritance, God is always waiting to welcome us back, to put some sandals on our shoes, to say, I have a pathway for you to walk in, a ministry for you to go in. I've got a cloak, a mantle, an anointing, a momentum in your life to restore your momentum again. And I have a ring to say, I want to identify with you because you belong to my family. It reminds me of the love of God. My name is Jack Windt, and you've been watching Timeout. I'll catch you next week.
You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song.